All right, so part two then, right? Once the railroads were well established and you didn't need to be right next to coal mines any longer because the railroad did a good job of kind of transporting that coal to manufacturing centers, you're going to see some manufacturing move to or expand inside of already existing urban areas with large markets and excellent connectivity to the world. A great example of this would be London. London was not near coal fields, but if we can see that when we just kind of take a look back at the map here. Um, London is a major manufacturing district. I guess you can't really tell that from this particular map. This this map shows it a little bit better. If you take a look at London on this particular map, you'll notice that it's not near coalfields. It was a particularly attractive city, though, for industry because of its port location along the Thames River. Its very large market, because London's a very big city, and because of its major role in the flow of regional and global capital, putting industry at the center of Britain's global network of influence. Paris is another good example. It also did not have coal or iron deposits in its immediate vicinity, but when the railroad was added to connect Paris, the city became the largest local market for manufactured products for hundreds of miles. It also had a ready labor force, an ideal regional position for the distribution of finished products, the presence of government agencies, a nearby port that wasn't too far away, and France's largest domestic market, right? So as time goes by, London and Paris become very important cities in the Industrial Revolution, even though they themselves were not necessarily near coal fields. Now, uh, increased industrialization, of course, led to demands for raw materials, and the search for new markets was a factor in the rise of colonialism and imperialism that again made maps like this one not only possible but absolutely inevitable. And of course, these European countries are developing industrial weapons during this time period that they're using to basically, you know, in some cases violently take down existing governments and colonize. So by the early 20th century, we're going to start seeing industrialization begin to diffuse far from the original European hearth into eventually northern Italy, into Catalonia, and other parts of northern Spain, southern Sweden, southern Finland, and by the 1950s, industrialization had fully diffused to the what we now call primary industrial regions of not only Western Europe but also Eastern North America, Western Russia and Ukraine, and East Asia. By the beginning of the 20th century, Europe's only real rival was North America in industrialization. The Industrial Revolution actually goes way back in the United States. It goes back to the colonial period in New England, in eastern Massachusetts. But, you know, not being rich in mineral resources, New England relied on raw materials from overseas sources in a lot of cases, and also the Great Lakes region where it could be shipped from. Um, Coal was the chief fuel in the American Industrial Revolution, and it can be found in pretty wide abundance from Appalachian, Pennsylvania to the northwestern Great Plains of the United States. Again, there is a geographic advantage here that puts the United States on the map, right? So one of your early locations for industrialization was also North America. And you'll notice from this map here, not only the northeastern United States, but also southeastern Canada in sort of this horseshoe that is made between Toronto to Hamilton to essentially Buffalo, New York. St. Petersburg is one of Russia's oldest manufacturing centers since its establishment under Peter the Great in the 1600s. And it later attracted industries, including the shipbuilding industry, the chemical production industry, the food processing industry, the textile making industry. USSR will sorry. The USSR will annex Ukraine after World War One, and use its rich resources also and industrial potential, especially in some of the coal-rich regions of eastern Ukraine, as you can kind of see on this map here. So that was part of a major industrial revolution that took place in Eastern European, or excuse me, in Eastern Europe and in Russia as well. And finally, in less than a century after beginning the Industrial Revolution, Japan also becomes one of the lead centers of world industrialization. Japan has limited natural resources, so it had to depend on raw materials from other parts of the world. And so, because of this, Japan also becomes this major empire building in the Pacific. It colonized Korea, it colonized Taiwan, it took over portions of mainland China in an area called Manchuria and the northeastern part of the country to bring in capital and resources for industry. If you look at a map of Japan, the Tokyo, Yokohama, Kawasaki corridor, as well as the Kobe, Kyoto, Osaka corridor, were kind of the two hearts of industrialization in Japan and continue to be the major kind of industrial hearts of Japan now in the 21st century. So that pretty much wraps things up then for kind of the overall history of how industrialization got started, why Great Britain, and essentially the ties between industry and colonization and imperialism. Um, and so I think that pretty much wraps things up for today. What we'll look at tomorrow is kind of what the industrial map looks like in the 21st century. Where do we see big industrialization happening now? What are your primary regions of industrialization now in the world in the 21st century? So we'll take a look at that tomorrow. That's your basic history lesson for today, and we will see you tomorrow.